There's a real Bitcoin boom going on, Dennis. What about this? The cryptocurrency topping 48,000 this morning. Tesla, of course, reported buying $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. It will accept for vehicle sales yesterday. What does this move in crypto mean for the broader market?
It's just astonishing. Watching what's going on in Bitcoin just stuns me no end. And the fact that Mr. Musk has said that he's going to accept Bitcoin to buy his automobiles, I find that hard to believe that that's going to take place. Something that can move 10, 12, 15, as we moved yesterday, 14%, changes the valuation of an automobile by 14% in the course of one day. Trying to buy a house with a Bitcoin changes the value of a house 14, 15, 10% in the course of a day. This is just utter and complete madness, but nonetheless, it is something that everybody wants to trade, something everybody is trading. The millennials believe in it. I have to stand back and say, in my word, it's not something that I'm going to be involved in, but if anybody else wants to buy it, I understand why the momentum is so strong. But does it make sense to me? No. What's even worse is what are they called, Dogcoin or Doji coin or whatever, however you pronounce it. Even the creator of that coin doesn't believe in the valuation model that he has or that the market has given to it. This is one of those things that comes around every several hundred years. It's tulips again. It's the dot-com enterprise in the early part of the 20th century. These things end in tears eventually, but right now, everybody's happy, everybody's buying it, everybody's making money in it. God bless them. They can do it without me.
Do you believe that there will be a digital currency at some point in America? I mean, do you believe in the notion?
Oh yes, the central banks will make sure that there is a digital currency, a digital dollar, a digital renminbi, a digital euro. They will not abrogate their responsibility to controlling monetary policy. Eventually, we're going to walk in one day, and there will be a Plaza Accord of some sort where they have all agreed upon creating their own digital currencies. No question that shall happen. When will that happen? I have no idea, but it's going to happen. The monetary authorities will never give up sovereignty over monetary policy, and that thus far that's what they've done. Eventually they shall say enough is enough. There will be a meeting. There will be a time when we walk in one day and Bitcoin's trading thousands of dollars lower. When will that happen? I have no idea, but will it happen? Absolutely.
With Bitcoin more than 2.5 years ago?
You know, we really did, but I can tell you, Tesla taking it is much more important than me taking it. But believe it or not, we've sold 17 cars, Bentleys and Rolls with Bitcoin. And it's something that, you know, my team wanted to do a couple of years ago. And as a matter of fact, it was 2.5 years ago. We've always talked about being innovative and ahead of everybody else, and don't be a dinosaur around here, or you won't last. So I have to talk to myself every day in the mirror, don't be a dinosaur. But we've always tried to be innovative, and so when I start seeing innovative people do that, it's interesting that we did it so long ago.
Yeah, you did, and by the way, kudos to you and on that. And I feel like that sort of leads us to the next conversation, because alongside crypto is the growth of online gaming. And the growth of online gaming, whether it's table games or betting on sports, has been unbelievable. Tillman, you and I have talked. You believe it's going to grow even more. Crypto's going. Tell us about your growth projections, because your new SPAC does own part of Golden Nugget Online Gaming as well, about 30%. So you're getting a taste of that in Fast Acquisition Company. Your growth expectations for online gaming, how big it can be, and whether it ever may converge with these cryptos.
Well, this is something that I say all the time, and it's 52%, not 30%, but that's okay. This is really the way it is, okay? Look at New Jersey, okay? We're the leader in New Jersey, and we do about $30 million in EBITDA in online gaming. And remember, 30 years ago, this is really interesting, you only had gaming in Nevada and New Jersey. Well, states are opening up almost weekly and monthly right now for online gaming. We'll probably be in 8 to 10 by the end of the year where we have been approved and about to start. If we just did $20 million a year in online gaming in all 50 states, where I think it's going to be approved in the next 5 to 7 years, that's $1 billion EBITDA company, and we're just trying to get a little piece of the pie. And so this is a huge growth industry. That's why all the professional sports have had to realize it's part of where we're going. And I do not see when people say, oh, this stock's overpriced or this stock, they're just looking into the future, and that's what Wall Street does.
And what you do is you have details. I meant 30 million shares, not 30%, so I got to shut up and listen. A very good catch for you on that part. I just threw that out there on purpose, Tillman, see if you were paying attention. Do you really believe we could be 45 states out of 50? Because when I look at the growth projections for the numbers that we have seen in New Jersey and other places, I mean, this could become one of the biggest industries in the United States in less than a decade.
Yes, I mean, remember, it took years for states to fall for land-based gaming, and I believe 40-something states now have some form of land-based gaming. But even in Texas this year, which is a very conservative state, there's been serious talk and discussions of trying to get bills out to allow online gaming and sports gaming. Now, you got to remember, this is all partly because of the pandemic. Everything's happening quicker, certain technologies, and that's why you've seen such growth in technology companies, because the pandemic has speeded it along for all of us.
Tillman, it's Morgan. Proposed stimulus package, this new one, is making its way through Congress. It does seem like if and when it reaches the Senate, that proposed minimum wage hike may go away. But when you're talking about direct checks, additional direct checks to some Americans, or another potential $25 billion for the restaurant industry, how are you thinking about that money? How much of that do you expect to actually make its way into reality and into your businesses?
Well, I think the stimulus for restaurant owners is great. I've said this before. A lot of people are failing today that isn't bad management. They truly just ran out of money and don't have the size and the capital to fight through a pandemic like we do and so many other larger companies. So I'm thrilled that they're getting this stimulus. And then at the same time, I'm thrilled because the individuals are getting the stimulus, and so many Americans, because I'm in the consumer business. I mean, I sell food, I sell gaming, I sell hotel rooms, I even sell Bentleys and Rolls. And believe it or not, what's really interesting during the pandemic, we've had one of our best years ever in 1920, I wish, in 2020, it's selling Rolls and Bentleys. It's really unbelievable. I think back of the Roaring 20s, and that's what I was saying. It's almost like the Roaring 20s because of this.
Corner of the screen is Kenny Polcari, who joins us this morning, market guy. Look, Kenny, you can't ignore this market frenzy. I don't care whether it's GameStop, AMC, Bitcoin, silver, or a SPAC. Do you think the retail investor should be part of it?
Listen, I think the retail investor is already part of it, but I also think the retail investor needs to understand and put it in perspective, because I think valuations are stretched, and I know I keep saying it because I thought we were going to get this pullback earlier in the year, like late January, which we started to, but then there are so many people expecting the pullback, it doesn't really happen, because every time the market gets a chance to pull back, they all jump in for that fear of missing out trade. And so the retail should be in the market. Whether they should be chasing stocks at these levels is another question. I think that's really the question we should ask. And I would say they should absolutely not be chasing. If they're already invested, they should sit back and they should enjoy the ride, and then they should wait for the pullback to come in to jump in and allocate more assets.
Is Bitcoin a separate case? As you know, it's soaring this morning. You're at 46,800 right now. And there's a lot of big companies that have put their cash, or at least some of it, into Bitcoin. Right. Is that a separate case?
Listen, I think Bitcoin is a case unto itself, right? It's still very much a new asset class. Mike Murphy said it himself. You know, he's not sure he wants to chase it. He doesn't really understand it. What's it really mean? Although I will say, I felt like that for a while. I've been learning more about it. I've been understanding more about it. I'm watching kind of what's going on. I also started dipping my toes in a little bit because I think you have to have some exposure to it. Look, it may blow up and it may not. Just don't overweight yourself in it. Get a taste of it and get a feel for it. But I think it's a little bit ahead of itself. But again, it's a new asset class that I think everybody's getting used to. You got names like Elon Musk, who's almost Greek godlike, though every time he speaks, everyone reacts with such a visceral reaction that you can't help it. You saw what happened yesterday when he tweeted out about Bitcoin, is what caused that surge yesterday. So you got other people that are going to start jumping on that ship. You got Mike Novogratz, who's screaming about it being $100,000 or $500,000 asset soon enough. That it just creates its own momentum. So I think you're going to be in it, but I think you have to be cautious.
What worries me is the authorities, like the Federal Reserve, for example, or the Treasury, jumping in and making some statement about how, we've got to get a grip on this thing, just like Robinhood froze trading in GameStop and other shorted stocks, and that wrecked them. They came all the way down. That's what worries me. The slightest word from the authorities would really unbalance the Bitcoins of this world. Last 20 seconds to you, Kenny.
Well, and that might be true, but at some point, the Federal Reserve and the other central banks are going to have to jump into this argument. They can't, I suppose, just let it run free without really understanding what it means to the global economy and to kind of the monetary system as we know it. So that's kind of a story that's still being written, so we'll see. The whole Robinhood issue, I'd love to talk to you about that, but we don't nearly have enough time.
If you're not careful, you'll be invited back, Kenny, and we'll get you up in the middle of the night. All right, Kenny, thanks for joining us. Come back soon, okay?
Thanks for having me.
Bitcoin topping $48,000 overnight. That came, of course, after Elon Musk's Tesla said it was buying the cryptocurrency. The takeaway from Wall Street on all of this, I'm hearing that Tesla's move is likely to unlock some dormant Bitcoin demand from other companies. JMP Securities telling clients that Tesla's move de-risks some similar decisions for any corporates. It adds more cover, they say, for any CFOs thinking about crypto. RBC, meanwhile, said that Apple could be next and has, quote, a clear opportunity to offer crypto. Fundstrat also said that Tesla marks, quote, the beginning of a larger corporate demand trend. Fundstrat and Tom Lee's team did crunch some of those numbers for us on what demand could actually look like. And based on the S&P companies holding roughly $2.8 trillion in cash, if they all take the same percentage as Tesla, for example, which was about 7%, that could mean $215 billion worth of Bitcoin demand. We've already seen some elevated buying from so-called whales in the market, according to some new data from Chainalysis. While it's holding more than 1,000 Bitcoin, which was worth around $40 million at the time, saw their highest level of buying ever during the first 2 weeks of January. That was when Bitcoin was around 40,000. Tesla said that it bought Bitcoin at some point after January 4th, and Chainalysis says based on that demand really stepping up a gear in those weeks, it was likely in early January. That buying did drop off a bit in the second 2 weeks of January, and analysts tell me that the drop shows that without those bigger buyers, there really wasn't quite enough demand to support prices above $40,000 at the end of January. The Tesla announcement, though, may change that dynamic if Wall Street analysts are right about this new wave of corporate buyers.
Explain, who do you think is next? RBC posited perhaps it would be Apple, but what kind of corporation is going to sort of dip their coin into Bitcoin in terms of reserves next?
Yeah, well, I think this is part of a really big trend, which is going from early adopter to mainstream. And when you do that, you've gone through different phases. You started with the crypto enthusiasts, that's morphed into institutional traders, and now you're getting the corporates that are coming in. And Tesla and Elon Musk is just the latest example of that. There's going to be many more because this is part of a mainstream adoption phase that's really going to continue. And I think this is really about creating financial freedom and creating a lot of engagement for both companies, but also consumers. And so you see this with PayPal, you see it with Tesla, and it's going to continue to happen with more large financial institutions, I think, probably being the next ones on board.
But Charles, is Elon Musk more of an indication of sort of corporate trends, or is he a Bitcoin enthusiast? I think it's a big leap, at least, to make between Tesla and you have Square and MicroStrategy and some of the more mainstream corporations actually taking this step.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's going to be a part of a journey. And so you're always going to have early adopters, you have mainstream coming together. It's when the river hits the ocean here. And you're going to see this more and more because it's really clear that this is an asset that is gaining institutional awareness. And it's something that gives you a chance to participate in the upside of a new emerging asset class. And that's what treasuries are looking for. You want to hold basically debt at zero and stock market's at an all-time high, you know, you start to look at other opportunities, and Bitcoin's one of them.
That's a really good, actually interesting point, Charles. I mean, you have to imagine that corporate treasurers have tried to game out whether or not the currency is due for the kinds of corrections that we've seen in the past. And I'm assuming if they're really assembling billions of dollars onto the balance sheet at a time, that they think that kind of volatility, at least, is a thing of the past. Do you agree?
Well, I think, you know, Bitcoin has the possibility here of being a monetary network. So not only as an asset, you're part of a monetary network. And so you can imagine corporates and others starting to think about, how can I begin to move this to make payments? How do I begin to think about how to use blockchain technology beyond just Bitcoin as a way to solve my problems? And I think this is part of that bigger trend of this technology really changing how the infrastructure of financial services works. And so it's not just around changing, say, a monetary network, which is what Bitcoin is, but it's even changing how assets move and enabling us to solve a lot of different problems in the financial system around the infrastructure and the architecture, and help even be able to prevent problems like we saw last week or 2 weeks ago with GameStop. There's so much possibility here, and Bitcoin is, I think, the leading edge of that. It's really kind of the gateway into this new open financial system that's starting to emerge.
And Charles, that's an interesting aspect of this that maybe you can talk some more about. I think part of what Carl was getting at, too, is that Tesla seems to have bought into Bitcoin for stability, not necessarily for asset appreciation, you know, so that they can kind of in a fluid way do transactions. So there is the asset conversation about Bitcoin and people who have made it popular in part because they hope that the value of Bitcoin goes up. But then there's also the platform conversation about Bitcoin that's very different, right?
Absolutely. I think that's a key component here. There's a lot made of the fact that Bitcoin is very volatile, which it is. And that's because when you're going from an asset which was zero to becoming, say, gold, that's going from zero to trillions and trillions of dollars. And so, of course, you're going to be volatile on the way of that journey. But ultimately, if you get to that end point, you start to become less and less volatile and more, not just a store of value or a potential store of value, but you start to become a monetary asset. And being part of the monetary network means you now have a different ability to move assets around. And Bitcoin could very well be one of those prime assets in that new system. I think that's partly what's happening here. And so in some ways, part of the journey of going from early adopter to mainstream is that journey of price appreciation and then hitting lower volatility and being used in a different way. And that's exactly, I think, what you're starting to see now with this mainstream phase, where it'll become, you know, very much about more than just price appreciation.
Well, Charles, thanks for coming on and chatting with us today. We see Bitcoin now on Coinbase below 47,000 at the moment. Thanks, and hope to talk to you soon.
So I want to get straight over to CNBC headquarters to hang out with our friend Jim Cramer, see what he's thinking about before this market opens. And Jim, it does appear that it is going to open down. Is this just a breather? And what do you make of what's happening in the market? And then I'm trying still, even a day later, I know we talked about Bitcoin yesterday, but trying to make sense of where this is all headed.
Well, look, I think it's worldwide. We're catching it here. There's need some more good news. We don't have it. We still want to know about stimulus. The variants, the vaccine variants that we're having trouble with, I think are very much on people's minds. Look, I happen to think that Bitcoin is exciting. It's something we can talk about endlessly. There are promoters of it. There don't seem to be a lot of sellers of it. We're going to hear from PayPal in an analyst meeting coming up about how it's begun to be mainstream. I just think that in the end, you have to have some sort of hedge on it, because if you take it and it goes down, I think that you're going to end up saying, why did I use Bitcoin when I could actually transact in dollars? But as far as a way to be able to have a pastiche of things that you should do your cash with, I'm all for it. I think it's almost irresponsible not to include it. Every treasurer should be going to boards of directors and saying, should we put a small portion of our cash in Bitcoin? It seems to be an interesting way to hedge against the rest of the environment. Nice hedge against fiat currency.
But that's the question. Is it really a hedge, or is it fundamentally actually tied to the quote-unquote market right now? And we've seen when the market's gone down that it's gone down as well.
Well, I believe in gold as a way to hedge. I believe in selling calls against certain stocks as a way to hedge. So I'm much more a-traditional. And so I think that it's just a piece of the puzzle. I don't think a company should invest big. I mean, I think the Tesla put a lot of money in it. I don't have that level of conviction, but I own Bitcoin. I've owned Bitcoin for some time as an alternative. I used to always say own some gold, own some cash. Now I say own some cash, own some gold, and own some Bitcoin. It's a little inflated for a day, but there's still plenty of people who think it's going to 100,000. Novogratz was on everywhere saying it's going to go to 100,000. All I know is I think it's an alternative to having a cash position where you make absolutely nothing.
Bitcoin surging after Tesla announced a $1.5 billion purchase of the cryptocurrency yesterday. We reported that yesterday, a plan to accept it as payment. That was Tesla's plan. Will other companies follow suit? Joining me right now is the Chamber of Digital Commerce president and founder, Perianne Boring. Perianne, thanks very much for being here. Elon Musk already bullish on the cryptocurrency, and then he does this. Does a move like this move the needle at all in terms of making Bitcoin more mainstream?
Absolutely. And just to give you a little bit of context of where this demand is coming from and where we sit in the economic landscape, COVID has created a war on currencies. We're in an era of what Paul Tudor Jones calls the great monetary inflation. And one of the biggest challenges that corporate treasurers are up against today is debasement, the hidden tax on inflation. And we all know that money goes where it's treated best. Bitcoin is a store of value. It's a hedge against inflation. And we are seeing unprecedented demand for Bitcoin from investors across the board, from retail, institutional, and now we're seeing corporate. You know, on the retail side, Square launched their Bitcoin trading app in 2018 with Cash App. And last year, Bitcoin revenue was up 11x year over year, according to their most recent shareholder letter. PayPal opened crypto trading in October of 2020. It's been reported that crypto trading on PayPal is up over 900% since the start of the year. Moving to kind of the institutional investor, Grayscale is over 90% of their investors are institutional investors. Their assets under management grew 10x just last year. And now we're seeing the entrance of corporates from MicroStrategy, Square, and Tesla being the third.
Yeah, I mean, the entrance of corporate certainly lends credibility to this idea that we are going to have a digital currency. People want digital payment platforms, but you've got a few crypto platforms struggling with an overload of requests following Tesla's news. Issues like this and volatility scare investors off. How do we know which crypto is the right crypto? There are a lot of different cryptos. Why would Bitcoin be better than another one? So what needs to be done in terms of explaining this further, the pros and cons of which one, whether it's like Ethereum or Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin has emerged as an asset class in its own. It is unique. One of the most powerful characteristics of Bitcoin is that it has a limited supply. It's fixed. There's 21 million. So if you have a lot of demand for Bitcoin, the only way to address that demand is the price is going to go up. Bitcoin has really emerged as the winner of a store of value. You mentioned Ethereum. That's a smart contracts platform. There's many other cryptocurrencies out there. In terms of a store of value, a digital goal, a safe place to store your assets for many generations, Bitcoin has emerged as the winner of that use case.
All right. Perianne, thanks very much. We'll keep watching this market. Perianne Boring.
Joining us right now is Jim Paulson, Chief Investment Strategist at the Loothole Group. Is it just pure speculation, Jim?
Well, you know, Henry, I certainly see the indicators of sentiment improving, you know, whether it's high valuations, whether it's things like SPACs or IPO pricing or the Reddit revolution or sentiment indicators. There's no doubt about that. But I think part of that is because we've been through with pandemic, we've gone from the biggest bust to boom cycle ever in post-war history. And it's been at warp speed on the downside, warp speed on the upside. I think a lot of our traditional indicators just can't keep up with this. And there's good fundamental reasons why people feel better. And so I'm not so sure that fundamentals aren't keeping up with sentiment. One more thing, real quick. I would encourage people to do a Google's trend search on the word stock market bubble. And it's very low for years, and it's just exploded to the upside here in recent weeks. And that's why I'm saying there's just too much coverage and concern about a cycle-ending bubble right now, I think, to have one. Correction? Absolutely. Bubble ending, I don't think it's likely.
So you say we're going to continue to, you think there's a wall of worry, that we're going to climb the wall of worry here. What is it? What is the investment in Bitcoin and the price surge that we've seen and Tesla and everybody else's involvement in it say to you about where we are?
I don't know if it says a lot. I mean, Bitcoin's a new vehicle. I'm attracted to Bitcoin, quite frankly, because of its excessive volatility and its low correlation to the stock market. There's just no good way to use it right now, I don't believe. I think a lot of these stories that we focus on are small stories in the bigger market story. To me, the bigger market story is we're going to have maybe the greatest growth year in the United States and around the globe in decades, perhaps, in terms on the back of massive stimulus, massive savings, massive pent-up demands, and a palliative relief when everyone gets a shot in the arm later this year. Confidence among consumers, among small businesses this morning, Andrew, and I think investors are still depressed. And it tells me that if you think we're too giddy today and out over our skis, where do you think we'll be on victory over COVID Day? Let's say later this year when the herd is fully vaccinated and there's palatable relief.
Well, let me ask you about that, Jim.
Industries closed or reopening, jobs lost or regained. I think they'll be a lot giddier.
Jim, I want to be as positive as humanly possible, but what do you make of the idea that we don't get to herd immunity, that we don't actually get these vaccines out, that you look at what's happening in Israel right now, and there's actually a greater supply than there even is a demand. There's efforts now to actually try to push this on people that don't even want to take it.
I think there's high probability that we'll have a substantial portion of our population vaccinated by the end of this year. All types of possibilities are always possible, Andrew. We could have a brand new virus show up on our shores tomorrow that we have no vaccine for. This thing could mutate into something that makes our vaccines useless. That certainly could happen, but I think it's a low probability. I think it's a high probability that by the fall time or so, we're going to have substantial vaccinations. We're already vaccinating a lot of the elderly, which means death rates are probably going to be less and hospitalizations. I think we're already seeing reopenings happening across the country, which means that growth is going to be accelerated.